I'm Dave Berlin with ZDNet, and I'm coming to you from the Metreon in San Francisco, where Bebo just made a really big announcement regarding its APIs and how any application that's developed for Bebo can run on Facebook, any application that's developed for Facebook can run on Bebo. It's largely a story about interoperability, but also here is David Glazer. He's the Director of Engineering for Google's OpenSocial network, which was just recently announced in November. David, welcome to the Metreon.
Thanks, David.
So, we've heard a lot about the interoperability that's now been introduced as a result of this announcement. We see some applications that actually can interoperate between the two. One, if you're a developer, you build one application for Facebook, it just plugs right into Bebo, vice versa. And I also heard from Michael Birch earlier, who's CEO of Bebo, that an OpenSocial announcement is forthcoming, so that they will obviously be supporting the OpenSocial framework that you guys announced last month. How will OpenSocial take things to a new level for Bebo?
I think the main thing that OpenSocial does is it adds more sources of applications, can reach more users across more sites. So it just provides more interoperability. It's the same story. The story is developers want users want apps, and standards that allow interoperability let that happen. What OpenSocial does is lets any site that wants to support that in an open way, built on top of a good reference implementation, good infrastructure that we're providing to the open source community. We in the large now, meaning a lot of people from many sites, are providing that infrastructure, not just Google.
For people who are watching, let's just take a step back for a second. What exactly is OpenSocial? Like, give an example of, I built something on top of OpenSocial. How does that something end up working elsewhere on the web, and
Sure.
you know, bring it home for us?
It's really very simple. You build something on OpenSocial the way you build something for the web. One of the design goals of OpenSocial was make it so anyone who knew how to build web applications knew how to build better, socially enhanced web applications. You build your web app using JavaScript, using HTML, using all the tools you're used to. You include calls in your web application to the OpenSocial APIs. Things like, who are my friends? What is my profile? What are my friends' photos? You make those basic calls, include them in your app, and your app can assume that those calls will be answered in the context of whatever site your app is running on. So once your app is built, you can now make it available for a user on Bebo to install it on Bebo, and it runs in the context of the Bebo social network, social domain. You take that same application, you install it, a user installs it on MySpace, it runs in the context of the MySpace domain. Same with Orkut, same with High5, same with Ning, same with Plaxo, same with Friendster, same with anyone who chooses to support the OpenSocial APIs. One programming model, one application can now run in many different social contexts.
We heard earlier from a couple different partners to the Bebo launch. One's called Webs, the other one's called Bunchball. They develop games. And the way it works is that if, let's say, you're in Bebo, but you also have friends over in Facebook, you can invite your friends who are on Facebook to play a game with you without leaving Bebo, and they don't have to leave Facebook. There's obviously some interoperability going on there, but it sounds to me like it's a little bit more closed. You know, two companies are supporting essentially APIs or an infrastructure that isn't necessarily supported elsewhere. Would OpenSocial accomplish the same thing, but instead opening it up to far more sites? Is that basically the idea?
I think there are, well, I don't want to speak to, and I can't speak
Right.
to specifically what Bebo and Facebook are doing, you know, with each other or with any of their partners. But in general, the idea of OpenSocial is, yes, exactly that, to do whatever level of sharing of information people want and applications that can run across any different site, using whatever policies, which becomes the more interesting question. As you know, as anyone following the space knows, there's a fine line between what's considered a great a connected policy for users' information and what's crossing the line. And that's a policy question that each site needs to work out for themselves. But OpenSocial lets you implement your policies for sharing that information however you want across whatever sites. And of course, the fact that all of the reference implementations are open source means anyone who's concerned about exactly what's going on can read the code.
Okay, and bringing it again back to this announcement with Facebook and Bebo, actually Facebook's not a part of the announcement necessarily, but the idea being that today you have to go to a lot of trouble to build that interoperability with something where the environment's relatively closed, but tomorrow if 99 sites are supporting the OpenSocial framework, I develop it once, now it runs on those 99 sites as opposed to having to build integration one-off with each social site that's out there.
That's exactly the goal. I think, as Michael said in his talk today, there are always some idiosyncrasies where if sites want to do something that other sites don't do and expose it, there's extensibility built into the API to let them do that. But you hit the premise spot on in your question. The idea is you build it once and now you have access to a much larger community of users.
In a world where everybody's supporting the same social framework, does that not mean at some point the guy who's holding most of the data wins? Like, how do you survive in that environment where it's so open? How do these companies who are building these really unique and innovative social networks, how do they continue to survive if at the end of the day maybe they don't house any of the data? There's no sort of viral or lock-in effect from an end user's point of view.
I think that's a great question. I think that's very similar to the questions people asked in the 90s about how do you survive in a world where there's a web and everything's connected to everyone and all the information is connected and you don't have any lock-in and you can't force people to come to your piece of paper or your pile of bricks to get at your information. It changes things. It changes things in a way that's really good for users in the long run, in a way that's hard to predict the details of in the short run, but the end state is one that's clearly going to be better for users because users will have more choices and people will compete by delivering better value to users. And exactly how they're going to compete, if I knew that, then I'd be planning out details of how to play that game. What we're doing is making it easy for the people who do have those ideas, who do have the innovation on how to bring great functionality to users to do so without artificial barriers standing in their way.
Okay, well, David Glazer, that's a great summary of what OpenSocial does. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, David.
According to Glazer, they have some other big news at Google, and that is that an open source implementation of the OpenSocial framework just went live last night on December 11th, 2007 at the Apache website under a project known as Shindig. You can go there, you can get the code, use it, start putting widgets on your site today. Also, other news coming out is that they've moved from version 0.5 of the OpenSocial framework to version 0.6. You can go take a look at what they've done there on code.google.com. What they've done is they've added about 12 enhancements to the OpenSocial framework. Some of it they've known about since November 1st. Others of it have been added as a result of the discussions they've been having with developers since then. From the Bebo launch event at the Metreon in San Francisco, I'm David Berlind for ZDNet.